The restaurant glowed with warm candlelight as David Chen waited at his table, checking his watch nervously. Before, he was a software engineer who had reluctantly agreed to this blind date after months of pestering from his colleague Maria. Her name is Sarah, Maria had told him. She's brilliant, funny, and exactly your type. Just trust me on this. David had low expectations blind dates. Rarely went well, but he was willing to try. When a woman in an elegant burgundy dress navigated through the restaurant entrance in a wheelchair, David glanced over briefly before returning his attention to the door, assuming she was meeting someone else. But she approached his table. David? He looked up, surprised. Yes, Sarah. Me. She positioned her wheelchair at the table with practiced efficiency. Her smile warm, but her eyes watchful, clearly gauging his reaction. David stood awkwardly, then sat back down, mentally scrambling to process. Maria hadn't mentioned, but why would she need to mention? Sarah's disability wasn't relevant to who she was as a person. Yet David felt caught off guard, unprepared, uncertain how to navigate this without being offensive or awkward. It's nice to meet you, he said, recovering his composure. Maria speaks very highly of you. She speaks highly of you too. Though she conveniently forgot to mention I use a wheelchair. Sarah's tone was light, but there was a challenge in it, testing how he would respond. She didn't mention it, no. David decided on honesty. Can I be direct about something? I'm feeling awkward right now, not because you're in a wheelchair, but because I don't want to say or do anything that's accidentally offensive or insensitive. So if I mess up, please tell me. Sarah's guarded expression softened into a genuine smile. I appreciate that honesty. Most people either pretend they don't notice or get overly careful and weird. You just acknowledge the awkwardness, which is refreshing. Can I ask what happened? Or is that too personal for a first date? David asked carefully. You can ask. Spinal injury from a skiing accident 4 years ago. It's paralyzed from the waist down. I'm a graphic designer, I live independently, and I compete in wheelchair racing. The wheelchair is just how I get around. It doesn't define who I am, though. It definitely affects dating. How so? David asked, genuinely curious. Some men fetishize it. Some treat me like I'm fragile or broken. Some ghost after the first date because they can't handle dating someone with a disability. And some, like Maria, apparently don't mention it to blind dates, which I'm not sure how I feel about. Sarah looked at him seriously. So, where do you fall on that spectrum? Are you going to finish this dinner politely and never call, or are you actually willing to get to know me beyond the wheelchair? David appreciated her directness more than she probably knew. I'm going to finish this dinner because I'm hungry and you seem interesting. Whether I call again depends on whether we actually connect as people. The wheelchair is just logistics accessibility of venues, how we navigate certain situations. But it's not why I would or wouldn't be interested in you. That's a good answer, Sarah said. Let's see if you mean it. Over dinner, they discovered genuine compatibility. Sarah was wickedly funny, loved terrible pun jokes that made David groan, and had strong opinions about science fiction movies. David was earnest and thoughtful, with a self-deprecating humor that made Sarah laugh. They talked about work, family, hobbies, and discovered shared interests in hiking, which Sarah did on adaptive trails, and cooking, which Sarah approached from a wheelchair hike kitchen she had designed herself. Can I ask you something potentially awkward? David said as dessert arrived. I've answered worse. Go ahead. Earlier you mentioned that the wheelchair affects dating. I'm realizing I know almost nothing about how to navigate this. Like 4. A second date assuming you want one how-do? I planned something that works for you without being weird about it or making assumptions. Sarah looked surprised, then pleased. You just ask? It's exactly what you do. You say I'm thinking about? This activity, is that accessible for you? And I tell you yes or no, and we figure it out together? The fact that you're asking, instead of assuming, makes you better than 90% of guys I've dated. So would you want a second date? David asked. Yes, but I need to know something first. Are you okay with people staring? Because they will. Are you okay with accessibility being a factor in every place we go? Because it will be. Are you okay with me being independent and not needing you to take care of me? Because I won't. I'm okay with all of that. Are you okay with me occasionally messing up and saying awkward things because I'm still learning? As long as you're willing to learn and not defensive when I correct you, yes. Over the following months, David did learn. He learned which restaurants had accessible bathrooms, which hiking trails had adaptive options, how to naturally include Sarah in activities with his friend group without making her accessibility needs a big production. Sarah learned to trust that David's questions came from genuine care rather than pity, that he saw her as a whole person rather than just her disability. My family wants to meet you, David told Sarah 3 months in, but I should warn you, my mom is going to ask intrusive questions. She means well but has no filter. What kind of questions? Sarah asked. Probably things about whether you can have children, whether I'm prepared for the challenges of dating someone with a disability. Basically every inappropriate thing you can imagine. Do you want me to meet them? Sarah asked seriously. Yes, but only if you're comfortable. I'll shut down any inappropriate questions, I promise. At the family dinner, David's mother did exactly what he had predicted, asking within 10 minutes whether Sarah could have children. Mom, that's inappropriate, David said firmly. It's okay, Sarah interjected. Yes, I can have children. My disability doesn't affect that. But whether I want children and when is a conversation for much later in a relationship, not for a first. Just like you wouldn't ask David's previous girlfriends about their reproductive plans at first meeting. David's mother looked chastened, but also impressed. You're right. I apologize. That was rude. Humor and refusal to be treated as either inspiration or tragedy. Your family is intense, Sarah told David later, but they love you and they're willing. 6 months after their first date, David proposed not with an elaborate gesture, but with honest words in Sarah's adapted kitchen, where they had cooked countless meals together. Showed up to our blind date in a wheelchair. I was awkward and uncertain, and probably said clumsy things. David knelt beside her chair. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend my life learning with you? Will you keep teaching me that love is? But only if you promise to always remember that first date, that you were honest about feeling awkward instead of pretending. That you chose to learn rather than retreat into comfort. How could I forget? You showed up in a wheelchair and taught me that my awkwardness was less important than my willingness to try. At their wedding, in a fully accessible venue, that I was unprepared, awkward, and uncertain. Disability, it meant learning to see her fully as the person she is. Thank you, Sarah, for teaching me that accessibility isn't accommodation, inclusion. Thank you for showing me that love is built on willingness to learn, not on having all the answers. If this story reminded you that willingness to learn matters more than perfect knowledge, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment about when someone's patience helped you grow.